Welcome to another episode of the Prime Human Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Miguel Damas, and it's a real pleasure to be with you once again to tell you about the science of making sure that you optimize yourself, your performance, and that you live according to your own rules. Today, we'll be doing a very special episode because I will be answering a question that someone sent me after reading our newsletter. But before we get into it, just as always, a quick reminder that everything that I'm going to talk about, everything about the podcast, is only intended for educational purpose. So please do not change anything about your treatments, your protocols, anything without consulting with your doctors. Now, let me tell you a little bit of the background story of today's episode. So last week, I sent one of my founder briefing, our weekly newsletter that we are resuming, sharing, amongst other things, the top scientific news that I found over the week. And one of the readers replied to me, and I found the reply so insightful that I decided to use it as an excuse to record this episode, and more likely than not, a few more down the line. So this was the email. Hi Miguel, really interesting paper you shared. Do you think this regulatory bandwidth can be trained, somehow recover, or even increase over time? In other words, when autonomic, neuroendocrine, inflammatory, and metabolic flexibility is already reduced, is there evidence that it can be rebuilt through specific interventions or training? I'd love to understand which factors have the greatest impact, whether sleep, circadian alignment, exercise volume and type, stress management, nutrition, recovery, or psychological interventions. And to what extent do changes in markers like HRV, cortisol rhythm reflect a real increase in that regulatory capacity rather than just short-term fluctuations? And I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and we'll divide it in a few episodes. But the core question is, when this regulatory bandwidth is lost, can we recover? And he was referring to one of the papers that I shared that was just published a couple of weeks ago that I sent in the newsletter. And the topic and the title of the paper was Regulatory Bandwidth, a Theoretical Integration of Present Multi-System Stress Regulatory Capacity, which is a mouthful. But this is a very, at the core, the paper wants to create a unified theory that explains the loss of functional capacity with burnout as a multi-system function loss, which is interesting and actually a little bit more than interesting, but it is actually nothing new. In fact, it is just the core principle that we use with our founders and with our executives and with our investors. It's just the core theme of what I believe to be the best way to maximize health and performance is that, and you probably heard me saying it, and I've written it all over the place, that burnout is not a mental health issue. Burnout is actually a loss of ability to keep adapting to stress. And in fact, that's exactly what they are proposing, is a theoretical model that will put a lot of these multi-systems in place and create some sort of logic that we already know that exists. What I want to do today is to create some sort of frame that you can integrate and you can absolutely understand this principle and what is behind the multi-system approach to this regulatory bandwidth that is being proposed. And I will draw a few things. So if you're listening in the podcast, I'll try to describe what I'm drawing in my flip chart, but I will suggest maybe hopping to YouTube just to see what we are talking about. And I will start with this. This is probably the most basic, most important graphic that you should know about if you want to have any, or if you really want to understand what you need to do to overcome how you've been feeling, and especially if you're feeling drained, overwhelmed, loss of focus, loss of energy, if you feel that something is not clicking. And it's a very simple graphic that I usually draw in all my sessions. And it is like this, very simple. On the x-axis, we'll have time, and on the y, we'll have a theoretical scale from 0 to 100. And this graphic stems from what happens when you are training, when you are in the gym. To keep it simple, let's assume that you're going to the gym to gain muscle. The process of gaining muscle implies two different processes, one after the other, that need to happen with matching magnitudes. The first process that I draw here in red is the destruction side. When you are training, you are literally creating destruction. You are literally destroying the muscles, because that's when the process starts. It's exactly when you want to renovate a home. In the process of renovating a home, you need to first destroy what you want to renovate so that you can rebuild with the new materials or the new design or the new space that you want. So first we have the destruction side so that we can have the rebuild. The rebuild can only happen if you destroy. So as you can see here, they need to match, because if you don't have enough destruction, if you don't have enough stimulus going into the muscle, if you don't have enough destructive power, you'll not have anything to renovate. However, if you have a super high destruction power, too much for ability to renovate, well, you will end up with an unfinished home. And same goes with our muscles. If we destroy too much for ability to rebuild, it either will take too long, will create too much damage, will create too much soreness. It will take a long time to get the most out of it. So they need to match destruction and construction. So what is a destruction? Destruction are what happens in the destruction phase. You've probably have heard about. It's a spike in inflammation, it's a spike in oxidation, and it's a spike on immune activity, let's say. So all the things that happen here is CRP going up, IL-1 and IL-6 going up, then F-alpha going up, then we bring M1, macrophages, and neutrophils. We bring all the shenanigans that we can, because after we trigger the destruction, we need to clean it, break it down, make sure that it is primed for the second step to begin, which is led by other type of mediators and cells, which is the anti-inflammation, to make it simple, or anti-oxidation as well. And here we also have the reactive oxidant species, for instance. This one can all happen after this. So again, they need to match. One way that you have to destroy your training, muscle strength, is if you do cold therapy, cold showers, ice dumps, just in the first hours after training, because as ice will reduce inflammation, you just bring it down, so we'll not have as much destruction to lead to the construction. Because again, we want here at the end to be the strongest. Okay. Now, So far, so good. As long as we keep this in balance, that's super okay. The problem is when our baseline level of damage and inflammation is already high, which means that we have a lingering, ongoing destruction here. We have a lingering process continuously going on that require our system to adapt, because ultimately is destruction. So what happens if you already have like a baseline here? If you put the same training session, creating the same level of destruction, there's no ceiling on the amount of destruction that we can create. But there's a ceiling on the amount of anti-destruction, of anti-inflammation we can, and rebuild that we can create. When we have too much destruction going on, that's when we start losing power. And in fact, there are papers saying things like the loss of physical capacity throughout a career, sports career, or throughout life may be just caused by the fact that we are having chronic levels of inflammation, chronic levels of damage here. The reason I'm bringing this up is exactly the same baseline for the regulatory pathway theoretical model that is being created. It's because when we are talking about destruction, it's not just training, it's anything that triggers all this, is anything that puts our system under pressure. It's anything that creates something that's called allostatic load. Allostatic load is a technical term to address all the things that put our system in pressure and it needs to adapt, which is a fancy word of saying stress. Allostatic load is what stresses our system. The whole thing about burnout and the view that burnout is not a mental health issue stems from this. If you have a very high load into your system that is way more, it's way bigger than your ability to deal with it, no matter where it's coming from, it means that you are overstraining your system, you're overpushing, and just like the same way that if you use more your cell phone battery than you can recharge, you will run out of battery. It's the exact same thing. If you get this, I can promise you that you'll understand everything about health and performance optimization, because it's all about playing here. Now, let's dive a little bit more into allostatic load, because allostatic load, you can divide it into 4 pieces or 4 areas. The first area is neuroendocrine. The second area is cardiovascular. The third area is metabolic. And the fourth area is inflammatory. All the strain, all the stress, all the load that we put in our system will fall into one of these 4 areas, and combined we'll have the whole of all the static load that we are putting ourselves into, that you're putting in our system. In here, the neuroendocrine, we have stress, or what we call usually stress, which cortisol related. We have also all our hormones, your testosterone hormones, estrogens and progesterones, all the shenanigans. The thyroid is here as well, and also have our brain function, blood neurotransmitter, etc. is here. Cardiovascular, well, is your blood pressure, is your VO2 max, is your cardiovascular cardio efficiency. Then in metabolic health, it's more around the insulin and also your, let's call it your fat balance. So your cholesterols, your HDL's ratio, your ApoBs, LP little a's, all this is here. And then another one, the inflammation, your immune status, your inflammatory markers, and if you have chronic immune dysfunctions. Again, anything that puts pressure in your system will fall into one of these four areas. And unless you get a measurement on these areas, you're basically flying blind. Because what can we measure? Or what do we measure in our program? And you can check out in our website, primevalperformance.com/founder-protocol or founder-program, I think, is we can have numbers for all this, more or less detailed. But for instance, for stress, you can have the cortisol awakening response saliva testing. You can have the cortisol measurement in the blood or in the urine. You can have DHEAS. You have ACTH. You can have vitamin C, for instance. In hormones, have your T, your estrogens, your progesterones, your DHT more here, or if it is more for alpha or for beta, 5 alpha or 5 beta, you have your thyroid, T3, T4, RT3, shenanigans here as well. And then for brain, people find it astonishing to know that we can measure in our urine markers that will have direct correlation to levels of dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline. For instance, that an HMA or 5-HA, this is for dopamine, this is for serotonin. This is just here in this corner. For cardiovascular, already mentioned, blood pressure, VO2 max as well. Metabolic have insulin. And here metabolic, it's not all about the insulin resistance, just not about the insulin that we need to know is also the average sugar, fasting glucose, insulin markers, and then probably we can have a continuous glucose monitor to assess if you have hypervariability. And then in terms of your cholesterols, have the CT, the HLD, HDL, LDL, ApoA1, ApoB, and LP little triglycerides. Unless we are measuring all of this, we have basically no idea of what's going on. Actually, in terms of cardiovascular, we can also look into homocysteine. We do look at homocysteine for everyone, and B12, B9, magnesium. There's a lot of different markers that we can look in here. And then inflammation. I mean, at the very least, see ESR, IL-6, and then the CBC will have the immune profile. We can see also in urine if you have like a kynurenate, I think it's in English like this, kynurenate, and ratios to see if we have brain inflammation, etc. So what I'm trying to show you here is that in order to assess the allostatic load, we need to really have an actual idea on these numbers. That's at least what we believe, because this is the core of how we look into health and performance optimization, is to have all these numbers, or as many numbers as we can, to really have an idea of how this person is functioning, so that we can create the best possible strategies and plans. But there's another detail in here that is even more crucial for you as a founder, for you as a high paced individual, high ambitious, highly driven individual? It's because if the allostatic load is the combination of all these areas, all of them will be working in the same bucket. No matter where it is coming from, if you're pushing too much, it will create an imbalance. And the reason I'm telling you this, because I'm almost getting really, really sick of having my onboarding calls with founders and listening to the same story. Actually, I've heard one of my good friends, Marcelo Leb, co-founder, president of Remote, saying in a podcast and reminding. When I listened to him talking. I went back to our first call when he described an interaction he had with a doctor when he said how he was feeling, and long story short, the recommendation of the doctor was to, well, you just need to stress less, which I find absolutely offensive. And the reason I find offensive is because I've been doing this for a while now. I've talked to entrepreneurs a little bit all over the world. I've worked with people from 4 corners of the earth almost. And I'm yet to find someone that stresses for pleasure. And the reason I find offensive is that when someone says to a founder that is just bending over backwards, pushing beyond what can be conceivable, when the doctors tell those people, you just need to relax and do not stress, it's just a recommendation that is so detached from the reality that, I mean, again, offensive. People do not stress for pleasure. They stress because they are on a mission. They stress because it comes with a job. That's part of what I call the non-negotiables. But if you look into this, you understand why I usually say to my people, we will find a way to allow you to push and stress more. We just need to find the bandwidth and to find the room to it. Because imagine on a theoretical scale of 100 divided by the 4 areas. So we can all have 100 units of allostatic load, and we'll divide 25 per each. So if you are starting, or if you're building your dream, chances are your level of stress will be super high. Probably you are traveling quite a lot, and maybe you have an operation that's spread out across different countries. So we'll have travel, you'll have jet lag, you'll be stressing, you'll have board meetings, you have staff problems, have other shenanigans that come with a job. Yeah, non-negotiables. But also, you are working 18 hours, probably in front of your computer, and you need to make, I don't know how many decisions on any single week. So you're always looking into information, making the best decision to push. This is, so in this theoretical scale, this is a 25. However, keep in mind on the first graphic, keep in mind that we do have a good ability to recover if we allow for it, if we think about it, and if we work for it. 25 units, we are maxing out here and can even go overboard here. But if your cardiovascular system is good, so let's put the allostatic load that's coming from this area is the 5. Imagine that your metabolism is also working quite good. Your diet is not super on point, but you're not the worst in the world. So again, 10 out of 35. But because you're traveling quite a lot, you're working too much, and maybe you have gut issues, or maybe you have some allergies frequently, let's put here a 20 units. If you combine, we'll have here, what, 60? Is that, yeah, 60 units out of 60 out of 100. What does it mean? It means that if we only have to have a recovering system that has more than 60 units out of 100 to make sure that all the stress that you have here is manageable and the load that's creating is not overboarding, is not overwhelming, that you can still perform. And in fact, the more you increase here, maybe the more you can push here. So this is almost an ideal scenario, almost, because what I found, and that's the frustrating part, what I found is usually the case is that this is 25 here. Okay, most of it, the core or the root causes, where it's coming from, not non-negotiable. But in here, people slag. I mean, you're not doing that much of exercise. You're, say, seated. So you have, I mean, less than 20,000 steps per day, for instance. Your blood pressure is normal high. All of a sudden, this 5 becomes a 20, for instance. In terms of metabolism, you have a high carb diet. You eat a lot of crap, what I call a dirty diet. You have low protein on every diet, and your fats are all over the place. This 10 can easily become a 30. And when this happens, in terms of inflammation, you have high systemic inflammation, you have high immunological or chronic immunological issues, maybe chronic infections, maybe bloated, maybe constipated, maybe headaches, maybe brain fog, all those signs that your immune system is not good. And again, 20 can easily become 30. When you sum it up, you'll get more, right? You have 105 out of 100. Because if you remind, we can always push ourselves more. There's no ceiling. If you go and run a 200-mile race, the allostatic load will be on the thousands in this scale, because we can always push more. However, the recovery is always borderline capped. So if you are a founder with this, in something like this, which again is more common than you may think. Actually, it's super common. And probably you know about it. But no matter how much you recover, you will always be going downhill. And in fact, because most of the strategies that we can use to push recovery, exercise, diet, sleep optimization, sleep efficiency, stress management, all of them can increase this. You'll be on a negative, I don't know, negative 50. I don't. But the point here is, when you start feeling that something's breaking, that your thinking is not as sharp, as clear as it was, you start to feel sluggish, you start to procrastinate, you start to ruminate, being overwhelmed, being unsure that you can keep on going, that you can keep leading your teams, keep follow through, and you have the courage to talk to a doctor. So, well, I'm not doing okay. And when he said, well, you just need to stress, to stop stressing. You're stressing too much. So we just get rid of this. it will make no difference. It will make no difference. Actually, it will make it worse, because if a doctor that just told you you cannot do what you know that you can do and is not offering you any solution to the problem that you feel, I mean, it just increases the level of loss, of feeling overwhelmed. And that's why I find it offensive, because there's so much things that we can do, so many things that we can work on to keep it manageable. And in fact, when we work around this and we put here on less than 5, less than 5, less than 5, and the load is quite low, you can see how much you can push more. You can see how much you can keep on pushing. And again, this is the core of what we do. Actually, the core of the new theoretical model, the regulatory bandwidth. Just a lot of different systems, putting everything into one bucket. That is our ability to deal with stress. So now, what can we do? Let me draw here another line, which stems from what we have discussed. In here, we'll have on X, we'll have the allostatic load. On the Y, we'll have recovery. And in just not red, but in black. In here, what we have is our prime performance. Is when we can push as much for our ability to recover. The more we push, the more we recover. As long as we keep roughly in this line, we are doing the best, because we are pushing, but we are recovering. Yeah. So what happens when you, for instance, if we try to assess how much push, how much recovery you have, if you're here and you're healthy, you're good, you are super healthy. You're probably working on longevity and you're maximizing it. But there's so much that you could be doing. You know what? So much you could be pushing. The other way around is if you're standing here, as most founders are, it's not a if, it's a when you'll break down, because you're pushing way too much for your recovery. A simple way to understand where you are here is through the measurements of heart rate variability and resting heart rate. This is what all wearables, whether it's the Whoop, the Oura, the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, all those will track. And that is probably the big brother assessing you on a short and long-term basis. How are you doing? The lower the resting heart rate, the better, the more you are recovering. The higher the HRV, the more you are recovering. I will probably do an in-depth analysis of HRV, resting heart rate, and how I look into data, and what the science says about it. But the higher the HRV and the lower the resting heart rate, the more you are recovering. So we need to push as much as we can, as long as we keep this optimal. Okay. And now, going back to the question, can it be recoverable? If we stay here for too long, if our bandwidth is going down, if our ability to deal with the stress and the strain, if it's in balance for quite a while, and actually we are burning out, we feel that something is not quite right, can it be recovered? And the answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And I tell you yes because of two reasons. First, there's published papers showing or stating that both pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions can lead to the reduction of allostatic load, even measured by the damage in the chromosomes, in the length of the telomeres, which is the cap of the chromosomes. That is a good marker for aging and cell damage. So one, data is there. big papers have been shown that it's possible. So the combination of, again, pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions. And I'm personally more interested in the non-pharmacological, long-term, more sustainable interventions. But actually, because I've seen it day in, day out with my people, when we go deep and start measuring more than things that, but the basic things that I mentioned, and we start addressing, we are just replenishing your ability to recover. We are increasing here this side. When we go back to, going back here to the last, when we look into all areas and start reducing the magnitude, we start working on exercise. What is the best type of exercise for you according to your goals, your lifestyle, your body composition? What is your inflammation? Where is it coming from? Is it diet? Are you eating a clean diet or not? Are you having a high carb diet or high glycemic variability diet? How much protein are you having? What is the quality of your fat? What's the time of eating? How much supplementation do you have? And are you having enough supplementation for how much you're pushing? Are you having enough nutrition to support your system? What's your escape valve? Is it exercise? And if so, perfect. But what type of exercise? Is there anything else that you do to unload your mind? Can we work through it? Are you breathing? And yes, I know it's weird, but 80% of people hold their breath when they're on their email. That's been called email apnea. So again, if you spend most of your day on your email, it's worth considering whether or not you're breathing or not, especially now with AI, where the downtime is even shorter. You have multiple agents going. You work with multiple AI tools. And just a couple of months ago, a paper was published showing that having more than 3 AI tools or systems going on, it increases massively your brain load, 18% or 90%, if I'm not mistaken. So all of these are workable. All of these things can be addressed and can be tweaked. Either they are non-negotiables and we don't even go there. What? These usually non-negotiables. How much pressure you have to deliver results, how much travel you do, how many hours you work, how many decisions you need to make. These are non-negotiable. Those come when you embark on this journey. Even though there are things that can be done to minimize the impact, but these are pretty much non-negotiable. But again, everything else is negotiable, especially around the 4 core lift zones of health on diet, exercise, for sleep optimization. And again, it's not sleep length necessarily. Sleep optimization, sleep efficiency. When you're in stress management, when we work on these and we make sure that people do not feel lonely, that's when we go for max performance. And that's why I find this so critical, especially for people that I love to work with. People that just want to leave the world in a better place than where they found it. Founders, entrepreneurs, investors. If you feel that something is got not right, if you feel that something is missing, that you are not yourself, please do not accept when someone tells you that the only thing that you can do is to stop stressing, is to relax, is take a break. That's offensive. That's not true. That's just a corner of what we can do. Burnout is not a mental health issue. There's a lot of mindset involved, obviously. In here, anxiety can be a bad ratio of omegas in brain, can be one of the cause of anxiety. It can be having high inflammation in the brain, can actually the not having enough exercise. And I could go on and on and on. I'm not saying that anxiety doesn't have a mindset to it. And I'm more and more curious and inclined to look into the power of the mind. There's a lot of things there. But the bottom line is, yes, it's absolutely possible to recover from being drained, to recover this bandwidth, to recover from the load that you put on, to make sure that we have systems and strategies in place to address what's negotiable, so that people not only can keep working, but maybe even push more. And that's the core message I want to share with you today. So if you want to receive our weekly newsletter, our founder brief, just hop into primehumanperformance.com and you can sign in. I promise you that we will not send you any spam. We'll try to send a weekly newsletter. Let's see. And if you're interested, just apply to our program. Would be an honor to work with people that feel that they can do more. All right. Thank you so much for being here today, and I hope to see you in the next one.